I'm actually from Seattle, not originally, but lived there for well over a decade now. So it's a pleasure for me to be out here in Walla Walla, which I get to at least 4 times a year. It's such a great opportunity to have an awesome wine growing region in my backyard. I'm a master sommelier and have been since 2013, and I'm an educator from my day job, which is working with Guildsong. We actually have Stacy Lansbury here today, who's our head honcho, operations editor-in-chief. You have so many titles. Yeah. Big shoes. So it's great to see her and have her here. I'm here to talk about Rias Baixas. So I hope you're excited. Lost power. Hope you're. Yeah.
I'm learning Spanish, but I'm learning Spanish now.
Okay. I will just project if that's that I can. Okay. Untangle myself here. Okay. Cool. If you can't hear me in the back, raise your hand. Thumbs up. We're okay. All right, great. So, as I was saying, we're with Guildsong. I'm the chief educator, so I travel around North America and elsewhere to teach master classes. Normally they're 3 hours long, so I hope you brought fill up. I'm kidding. We're only at an hour with you today, but we have an awesome lineup of wines, and I think some wines that perhaps you don't associate with the appellation. Okay, so what I hope to do for you today is to pour you some different wines, pour you some killer wines, and give you a little bit of background on the region and some specificity on the grapes themselves and the soil and climate. That's kind of cool. Okay, and a little bit of the culture too, because the culture in Spain is, in my opinion, is one of the best cultures on the planet. All right, who has been to Spain? All right, that's awesome. That's a lot of hands. For those of you that haven't raised your hand, you need to move Spain to the top of your priority list. It is an awesome, awesome place. They know how to eat, they know how to party, they have a beautiful country. It's so, so diverse. In its wine style, you can find every single wine style under the sun. Oh, yeah. Just turn it on me. You can find every single wine style under the sun, okay? And they'll have their own unique identity, and none more so, well, there's a few, but Rias Baixas is one of the few that are truly unique due to the fact that it's completely different from the rest of Spain, okay? The majority of Spain is on this, what they call the meseta. Okay, so you have the Iberian Peninsula, which is not only Spain, but also what would be right here? Portugal, very good. All right, what would be right here?
France.
France, very good. So you have the Pyrenees that separate the two here. And then you have over here, you have the Atlantic Ocean, right? So while most of the growing regions are on this meseta, this high elevation plain, actually has a lot of parallels and similarities to Eastern Washington, in that it is an arid climate, usually with a lot of diurnal shift or temperature change from day to night. Okay, so that's really great for grape growing. Now it's a little different here, where we're going to look at today at Rias Baixas, which is in the northwest corner, just north of Portugal, and we are right on the Atlantic Ocean. So that's a really major influencer of the resulting wines. Okay, so as a result, what style do you think is most prevalent, not only from that question, but also what's in your glass on the table? White wine, right? Okay, so we have that major moderating influence and cooling influence from the Atlantic Ocean. So that really dictates the wine styles. And normally you're used to seeing these wines as still wines, but there's actually an emerging sparkling wine scene, and the quality is super high. And Albarino takes really well to sparkling wine production because of its naturally high acidities, because of the natural kind of quote-unquote minerality. I know that's a hot topic with a lot of people right now, but we can all just today agree that there is minerality in wine, right? If I pour you Chardonnay that's grown on limestone versus Chardonnay that's grown on sand, they're going to taste completely different, right? Same thing with Albarino or lots of other varieties. So let's just agree to utilize the word minerality until better research is done until then. So you actually have a sparkling wine in your glass in wine one that I'd like you to taste now. We're going to taste the rest of the wines at the end of the presentation, but I do want you to get the full sense of that. We poured it very last minute so the temperature is proper for you, so the bubbles are preserved, all that kind of good stuff, okay? So here we are right on the Atlantic northwest corner, just north of Portugal, and it actually shares a lot of similarities to a little appellation in the north of Portugal that would be what? Right on the Minho River. Anyone know? Vinho Verde? Okay, who drinks Vinho Verde? Okay, oh yeah, all right, awesome. So very similar in styles as far as the grapes utilized. However, I would say that Rias Baixas tends to produce kind of more weighty wines in general, and Vinho Verde tends to produce these kind of light, even slightly effervescent, fun to drink wines. Although there are some serious wines being produced there that, if you pour them side by side with really good Rias Baixas, you would not be able to discern whether they were from the Portuguese side or from the Spain side. So, if we look at Galicia, which is the larger kind of area that we are in, Galicia literally means green Spain. It's because it is such a different climate here. I'll show you some pictures. It is green, it's lush, you're right on the ocean, totally different from that dry, arid climate that you would see in most other growing regions, such as Ribera del Duero, or even parts of Rioja, or lots of others, La Mancha, etc. So when we're in Galicia here, there's a bunch of really fantastic DOs beyond Rias Baixas that I'll just touch on real quickly so that you know that they're there and so that you can try them sometime. They are not as widely known and or imported as Rias Baixas. I would say that when most people think of Galicia, they think of Rias Baixas. And that's because Rias Baixas has the clearest identity of all of these other regions here. So Rias Baixas, as you'll come to taste and learn today, is mainly Albarino, some other varieties, whereas you have these other appellations or DOs that are a little bit more diverse or less focused, whatever term you want to use, in their wine styles, but they're still really delicious, really great to check out sometime. So you've got, starting in the east here, Valdeorras, which for me is kind of the mecca for a different grape variety called Godello, Goddello. And when it's made properly, it's awesome. I mean, it's kind of like, it is very much like Premier Cru Chablis when it's done right. It's delicious. It takes well to oak. It takes well to stainless or to neutral oak. Does really, really well. And produces some awesome wines. They also produce a little bit of red wine as well from Mencia, or Mencia, however you want to pronounce it, right? You hear a lot of in the Spanish language. I'm not going to get in that story, so we don't have time today. Ribera Sacra, another great area for Mencia and Don Blanca and a few others. Ribera, similar as well, with a bit of Trejadura, and then we have Monterey in the south here, which is also similar with Caño and a few other varieties too. But Rias Baixas is what we're focusing on, and if you see where it's situated, it's right on the Atlantic with a lot of these kind of inlets or estuaries, all right? That really, I think, is what truly defines the region, in addition to the soil types, which are fairly common in each of the specific regions within Rias Baixas. You also see that these are quite far ways inland from the Atlantic, so they're not going to be as influenced by that cooling effect of the Atlantic, so that's why you tend to have a fair amount of red wine being produced in addition to some richer whites. Okay? So, if we start to show you some pictures here, you can see what Galicia looks like, all right? And how much the ocean influences here. So really, Albarino has found its home. There's a lot of debate as to where Albarino has come from originally, but most evidence points to it being indigenous to Galicia. Okay, it is grown outside of Galicia to some small effect. We have actually a little bit here in Washington, we have some in Oregon, California. They thought they had it in Australia, but it's actually Sauvignon Blanc, not Sauvignon. So this is really the home for Albarino. This is where it shows the most typicity, meaning you can buy a bottle today or 5 years from now from multiple producers for 5 years ago, and it's going to taste like Albarino, right? It's considered a classic by far, all right? No other place really does it like Rias, Baixas, and Galicia in general. So the DO was formally established in, actually first in 1980, my birth year. Any 1980s babies in the room? No? All right, one person. All right. So it was developed actually as an Albarino specific in the name appellation. And when Spain joined the EU later on in 1988, it was changed to Rias Baixas. Okay, and I'll show you some pictures of the soils and of the different influences that I think this name is more appropriate for. Because Rias Baixas literally means kind of low rivers or estuaries, all right? So Rias would be rivers, Baix is low, okay? It's Baixas, not Baixas, okay? Baixas, all right? It's a little bit challenging first time around. Spanish is not always easy, especially when you have a lot of different either dialects and or languages within the same country. So you have Catalan and Castilian and Basque and all sorts of good stuff. So it makes it a little confusing if you are used to speaking, kitchen Spanish, like I grew up speaking as a prep cook or a dishwasher in a restaurant. So a little bit different. So within Rias Baixas, we have several sub-appellations, 5 to be exact, okay? They all have a very clear identity, and this is mainly based on where they are situated geographically and how close to the sea they are. That really kind of dictates the wine quality, the wine style. Because the soils are relatively similar from sub-appellation to appellation. There are slight differences, but for the most part, we're looking at granite, schist, and alluvial soils, whether those be larger alluvials or smaller alluvials, and I'll get into the specifics of those in a second. So if we look at the map here, you start to see all the Rias, right? Rias being rivers and or estuaries. So they're all up and down the coast from on the western coast. So you have the Ria de Moros y Noya, you have the Ria de Arusa, which kind of flows into the Ria River, Pontevedra and Vigo, and then of course the mainstay here, which provides the natural boundary between Portugal and Spain, is the Minho. And all of these have significant effect on the regions either that they are very close to or the regions that are a little bit further inland. So, for instance, what do you think the wine style is going to be like coming out of Baixas versus Ribera de Ulla? Which one's going to be richer? Ulla, yeah, definitely, right? Because it's further inland, you have less of a moderating influence from the Atlantic, okay? Is it still present? Yeah. And also, because of the Ria de Arusa, you have this kind of channel or an opportunity for these cooling breezes coming off the Atlantic to go up this valley, this river valley, and to create a cooling impact. But it's still not going to be as significant as you would have it here in Baixas. And that's because the Atlantic acts like a big heat sink, okay? It's a moderating force, moderating influence. So it absorbs heat, radiates it, whether you're looking at a daily scale or a seasonal scale. So it kind of slows everything down. All right. Versus if you're on the Meseta in central Spain, you have really no moderating influence. Maybe you have the Duero River, but it's big, but it's not big enough to act like a heat sink like that, right? So you have a much more extreme type of weather, bigger diurnal shifts, et cetera, et cetera. So what we rely on here is the cooling influence of the Atlantic and those breezes and that overall cooling influence where we're not going to see the major shifts and changes. It also creates a little bit of a challenge too. It's not always a benefit. It's a challenge because it makes it a quite humid growing region, right? So you have to get crafty with how you are training your vines, how you're managing your canopy, and also what varieties are going to succeed there, okay? So in general, closer to the coast is a bit cooler, and inland is a bit warmer. And then we also have a latitude issue at play here too, where if we're heading a little bit further south, like in Condado de Tea, a little bit warmer for sure than up in Villa, but this is not a huge difference. It's really more about longitude than it is about latitude, okay? Does that make sense? Right, so this is the kind of OG Rias Baixas, okay? Develops on this. This is a high concentration of producers, growers, et cetera, then we have O Rosal and Cadalatea, which were also 3 of the original subregions of the DO when it was formed. Following that, we had a new one established in 1996, Sotomayor. And Sotomayor is tiny. You can see on the map, but also in the numbers I'll show you later. There's like 3 producers here, okay? Teeny, tiny. They make like 0.2% of all wine. Uya was added in 2000, so it's the newest. Still, even though it's a larger footprint, you don't have as high of a concentration here as you do in Salnes. But there's definitely a lot of room for expansion here and some pretty exciting things going on. Okay, so whether it's the Uya or the Minho, all of these things act as pretty significant moderating force when it comes to carrying that Atlantic moderating force when it comes to the vineyards. So as I mentioned, you have moisture challenges, right? So how are you going to train things? How are you going to deal with that? Well, you're going to raise things up. You're going to utilize that concentrated wind that's either coming out the Atlantic or coming up that river valley. And so you're going to raise it up so you get airflow underneath, and you're going to open up your canopy, right? So since it's generally overall cooler because you are in the Atlantic here and less shifts, you need to have ripeness brought in the form of sunlight. Okay, so ripeness is not just about heat, it's also about luminosity or exposure to light. All right, so managing that airflow, combating any kind of rot that's caused by the moist humid air climate, or excuse me, moist and humid climate. And also they have a fair amount of rainfall, so that's also adding to the issue of moisture management. And if you look at high quality viticulture around the world, not just here, moisture management is the #1 concern and challenge when it comes to producing fine wine. So you really have to get creative with that. So what they do is they raise it up on these pergolas or padas, and this helps, one, get a lot of airflow, and also traditionally for this region, which has a lot of other agriculture as well, it provided an opportunity for polyagriculture, right? So you could grow things underneath the vines while at the same time creating a better environment to produce higher quality wine. Okay, so there's a couple of different approaches here. Now today, there's not a lot of polyculture going on. It's really just about producing the best grapes you can to make the best wine that you can. Okay, so we do have some elevation to play with as well, which is definitely advantageous. So when I referred to luminosity before, well, how do you get that luminosity? Okay, yeah, it's through canopy management, but it's also through planting on the right slopes. So what slope would you guess you want to plant on in the northern hemisphere to maximize sunlight? South, yeah, okay, very good. Although climate change is having an effect on that, especially in warmer growing regions, not as much of an issue here. But you take Washington State, for instance, there's now more and more north-facing plantings happening because things are changing. As far as wine varieties go, it's really just about one variety. It has a very clear identity, as I mentioned before. It is Albarino, but there are all these other varieties that are allowed, and actually there are red wines that are produced. How many of you have had a red wine from Rias Baixas? You don't count it. I mean, you count, of course. She orders the Rias Baixas, so you've been there. Yeah, you're really only going to taste them locally, right? I can't think of a single one that is imported. And that's simply because 99% of all the wine is produced, that is produced is white, right? And again, it speaks to the climate and it speaks to the identity of the sophisticated region. There's nothing wrong with that, actually. I think that's a pretty beautiful thing that a region has it so figured out that they're like, no, this is what we do. We produce mainly still white wine from Albania, okay? There's beauty in that. It's awesome. There are some other secondary varieties that are allowed when it comes to both red and white, but more importantly for the white, Trajadura, Lorero, Quinta Blanco, Tarantes, and Gudeo. Gudeo is the one that I mentioned earlier that I think is really, really special. You're really not seeing it planted here very much at all. It is further east. But the two major players here that are blended often with Albarino are Trajadura and Lorero. Okay, and they both bring something different to the blend. All right, they serve a purpose, either whether it's for florality or for it's a type of fruit set or whatever it may be. If we look at the red varieties real quick, not that important for you to take away today, other than to know that they exist, and you'll see these in northern Portugal and also in other parts of Galicia, Susan, Espadero, Caño, and Lorera. Okay, so Lorero and Lorera are related, but they are different color varieties. So if we look at the specifics of Albarino, just to give you kind of a little bit of context as to why the variety does so well here, is that, to be perfectly frank, is that Albarino is kind of a badass of a variety. Okay, it's super hardy. It has the ability to grow for many, 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 many years, much longer than a lot of other Vitis vinifera varieties. They actually have vines that are between 200 and 300 years old here that are still surviving. Are there a ton of them? No, but there are a lot of vines that are 80 plus years old, 80 to 100, 110, 150 years old. Okay, you can buy these bottles for not that much money. All right, and they're really, does vine age equate to quality? Not necessarily, but more times yes than no. Okay, what it does is when a vine gets really old, is that one, it kind of slows down just like we do as we get older, right? And it focuses on the important things. All right, so what are the grapes to a vine? It's life, it's reproductive process, right? So if you have less and less energy to go, where are you going to put it? You're going to put it in the important stuff, which in this case are the grapes. Also, the root structure is deeper than younger vines, right? So it's extracting more of that sense of place, and you end up with better wine. All right. Also, it learns to kind of manage its own yields a bit better. And of course, one can step in and say, we're going to prune this, prune that, and lower the yields, but it doesn't naturally because it's just learned over the years that to do that through regular pruning and whatnot. So it's pretty cool that they have a fairly high concentration of old vines. Okay. And actually, Spain is a wealth of old vines in general. If you go to other regions, you can really find a super high average of old vine material, which is super advantageous, and the advantage of being in the old world versus the new in some cases, for sure. So it's also badass because it deals with this moisture really, really well with its thick skins. So it is not as susceptible to rot, to this moisture challenge. It also means that with these thicker skins, you get a lot of phenolic density. Right? So if I was to take fresh bunch of grapes and squeeze it for you really quickly and put it in a glass and you would drink it, you're like, yeah, that's delicious and sugary, whatever. But really a lot of the flavor is coming from what's in the skins. Okay, so when you see these thicker skin varieties, they tend to have more phenolic density. That's where all the goodies are. Okay, so any variety with thick skins is a good thing. Within that kind of phenolic set, we have usually without a lot of monoterpenes. Monoterpenes is simply the nerdy term for that kind of floral type aroma. Now it's not as obvious or as concentrated as like neonate or berberine or anything like that, but it is a really kind of lovely perfume that really is a nice counter to the minerality and the salinity and acid of wines. Okay. So yeah, I like Albarino a lot. It makes sense why it does well in the region. Trejadura is not native to the region. It is the challenge here is the compact bunches. So if you have any kind of rain event or whatever, it's harder to dry that out in order to prevent rot. It also has thinner skin, so it's definitely a little bit more challenging. But the advantage of Trejadura and why it exists here is because it's a late butter and a mid-ripener, meaning that the growing season is more compact. So from a farming perspective, it's a really safe bet, right? You need some insurance. It's kind of like the Merlot of Rias Baixas, okay? It is low in acid, however, so you have to be really cognizant of that. If you have too much Trejadura, which you're not allowed to have by law anyways, but if you were to have too much, it wouldn't be that kind of hallmark zippy structure that we're used to from getting in Rias Baixas. Lorero is the other one. It really gets its name from the word laurel. It's the most perfumed of all of them, so it's there to add a little lift and to add a little another layer of complexity to to the wines. But again, a lot of the wines are varietal Albarino, and they're killer. Okay, these are just possibilities, and I just want you to understand that they exist and why they exist potentially in the blend. All right. It's also an early ripener as well, so it's a little bit of an insurance policy for farming. Now you have all of these different styles labeled as such for Rias Baixas. And you're like, whoa, that's a lot, right? But it's really not that bad. So really, if it just says Albarino, it's 100% Albarino, pretty straightforward, okay? Rias Baixas just means it's sourced from Rias Baixas, and then you can have subregions. You'll notice that it's really just the original subregions. There is no specific labeling for Sotomayor or Ulla yet. That will probably change, probably sooner in Ulla than it will in Sotomayor. But that will simply just mean it comes from those specific appellations, the fruit will, and also that it's a minimum percentage of Albarino or Albarino in another variety. Okay, so it's from Condado de Tea, it will be some Trajadura mixed in, and if it's from Rosal, it would be Lorero that is mixed in and included in that minimum of 70%. All right. And then you also have this other option here that is gaining a little traction and I think has some validity. However, we're dealing with a very aromatic variety, so we're generally not wanting to put it in a really oxidative environment like a barrel. All right, but it does exist and it can work. And we're pouring you a pretty delicious one today that I really like. But it is not common to have these barrel-aged examples in the region. All right, because it is about preserving freshness, about preserving the aromatics, and not kind of clouding it, possibly with Barrique, although when it's done right, it is very, very good. It just takes a lot more talent to do it right. And then you've got Tinto, or red, which is less than 1% of production, and then Espumoso, which again is on the rise. So, we already talked about a little bit about the viticulture here. I don't need to get too much more into it, but it's really just about the airflow and maximizing the light in this overall cooler area. So again, on those pergolas you see, it's not always the case though. Here we have some traditionally trained vines, trellis trained, right? On wire trellises with VSP most likely. So there are other ways to do things, and we have more knowledge than ever today as far as utilizing different training techniques and whatnot, farming methods, and that goes hand in hand with, especially in a more moisture-rich environment like this, learning how to deal with that moisture naturally, either whether it's through the training and or through finding solutions to combating rot that aren't conventional chemical solutions. All right, so that's getting better and better and better, and not just here, but around the world for sure. Too far from my, there we go. So as far as soils go, as I mentioned, it is pretty even across the appellations. So the parent rock is, you can kind of basically put it into two camps, right? You've got igneous rock and you've got sedimentary rock, okay? Sedimentary / alluvial rock. So the igneous rock comes in the form of granite, okay, which will have high levels of quartz in it. You can also have schist, which is a type of igneous rock that has lots of striations into it. Can flake. It's a bit harder. It's really well desired because all of these things, and even when you get to the alluvial, it's all about low nutrient soil, okay? Because if you had high nutrient soil, what would your vine do?
Vigorous.
Yeah, it's super vigorous, right? It would be lazy. It wouldn't really dig for anything, so you wouldn't get awesome root structures, deep root structures, which is going to extract the sense of place. Also, you would just produce a lot but not have enough flavor. So we really want poor soil. So those igneous rocks do that with granite and schist, and then we have a host of alluvial soils and colluvial, so either moved by water or moved by gravity. And that makes sense because we have lots of river systems around, right? So it's natural to have these alluvial. And alluvial is not just one simple answer, right? You either have these kind of larger rocks, or you have a finer sand or clay, which is just simply decomposed other soil types, right? But you'll see that these are all really conducive for high quality grape growing, either one because they're penetrable by roots and or low in nutrients and or high in minerals. Okay. So as far as winemaking goes, we mentioned that there's barriques used, there's sparkling made, but however the bulk of production is going to be about preserving those aromatics. So you're looking at reductive environments as far as winemaking goes. Okay. So mainly stainless steel, although that wasn't always around, so neutral barrels that can also be utilized. But it's really about preserving those aromatics, those monoterpenes and other phenolics. And then building complexity, utilizing other winemaking techniques other than the barrel. And that, the primary one here is going to be lees contact. So lees are a hallmark characteristic of Rias Baixas, of Albarino. They really help to build body, and they also, and texture, aroma as well. So when you're aging a wine on lees, what exactly is happening? Anyone know? Why do we do that? What's that? Okay, so not from the skin, because it's off the skins here. It's already fermented, it's aging on the lees. What are the lees? Lees are dead yeast cells, right? So we often talk about this when we talk about champagne production, sparkling wine production. And so some processes happen. So one of the important processes is called autolysis. It's simply the enzymatic breakdown of lees, right? So that adds richness. It adds what you recognize in champagne is like brioche and toasted nuts and all these other cool things, right? Here it's just to a lesser extent. Also, lees are really good at gobbling up oxygen, okay? So it's another way to preserve the aromatics and the freshness of your Albarino in this ideally reductive environment in most cases, okay? A lot of producers are using wild yeast. That simply just means yeast that is not cultivated in a lab. It is yeast that is naturally present on the grapes themselves or in the winery. There's yeast in this room right now, okay? Yeast all over the place, all right? So what a lot of people believe is that that creates, captures, I should say, more of the identity of the terroir. It's a big debate. I'm not going to get into it too much today. I'll let you write about it or read about it or whatever you want to do. Malolactic fermentation is utilized and not utilized. It's really about winemaker preference. So malolactic fermentation is simply the conversion of malic acid, which is the second most prevalent acid in grape must, to lactic acid. So it's a richer, creamier mouthfeel versus that malic, happily zingy type acid. Okay. We often associate that with Chardonnay, but the reality is that one, almost every red wine goes through malolactic fermentation. Two, a lot of white wines do, and it's sometimes appropriate and sometimes not. And you're definitely not always going to get that diacetyl type flavor that we associate with like old Cali Chardonnay. Okay, malolactic is not a bad word. Okay, it can be a really handy winemaking tool in order to build body and mouthfeel. All right, awesome. Gotta get tasting wine soon. Tick. This thing needs to arrange. There we go. Okay, so as far as exports, we love Albarino, right? In the States, I would go as far as to say that Albarino, at the very least, if not Rias Baixas, is in the lexicon of your average consumer. Would you guys agree or disagree? Yeah. Most people know at least what Albarino is, maybe not Rias Baixas. One, because it's hard to pronounce, right? It's a little bit intimidating to be like, oh, how do I say that? But everyone can generally say Albarino. And we drink a lot of it, right? So if you look at these numbers, it just keeps going up and up and up every year, followed closely by the UK and Germany, which drinks a ton of wine that we don't always talk about. But so 10% increase in world wine exports from 2015 to 16, and 18% increase from 15 to 16 in the US. That's pretty incredible. I can go into any grocery store and buy awesome Albarino. That is one of the great things about Albarino or Rias Baixas is that it's still accessible, right? One, it's accessible stylistically. If you have your classic Sauvignon Blanc drinker and you're like, hey, try something new, try this Rias Baixas, try this Albarino. Are they going to like it? Hell yeah, they're going to like it, right? I would be surprised if they didn't like it, honestly. There's so many similarities. If you take your average Chardonnay drinker, that's not necessarily into big, rich oaky styles, you pour them out Mourinho. Are they going to like it? Yeah, they're a fan of Chablis, they're going to like it, okay? But the beauty of this is that it's inexpensive, right? The most expensive bottle of Rias Baixas is probably retail is probably $50, and that is really rare. Normally they're like from 10 to 25 bucks, 30 bucks, okay? And that's not an indicator of low quality, that's an indicator of extreme value. Because as you'll taste today, there's a lot of wine in the glass for not a ton of wine. If we break down where it all comes from, kind of already covered this already, but the Salnais is the OG appellation, remember? It's the highest concentration. The others split up the remainder. You see how insignificant at this stage Sotomayor is. No offense to Sotomayor, just they just are super tiny. Okay. As far as this is interesting, wineries versus growers. Okay, so if we just look at the highest concentration area, which is Val de Salnais, we have 4,065 growers and only 119 wineries. Okay, so it's completely different here than a lot of other regions. This is almost kind of more akin to Champagne or something like that. The point is that it's a very grower-driven region, all right? And the plots there can be super, super tiny, very similar to like Burgundy or something like that, where you have just a lot of tradition of agriculture, which included grapes. So maybe it wasn't always the primary focus for people, and but it's always been part of it. And so you have a lot of plots, a lot of growers, not a lot of producers. So as a result, you have a few larger producers that are supporting those growers, and or there are co-ops that are provide a place for those growers to either go and make their wine and or contribute their fruit to a co-op label. Okay, and co-ops are great. Co-op is also not a bad word. In the wine world, they tend to kind of have a bad rap. That is not the case. Some of the greatest wineries in the world are co-ops. Okay, anyone think of one?
Champagne Marie.
I'm sorry?
Champagne Marie.
Okay, yeah, Champagne Marie, right? Also, Purgatorio de Barbaresco, right? Anyone drank that lately? Does it suck? No, it doesn't. It's delicious, right? So, Turlon in northern Italy, there's a whole host of them. So, we're going to pour you a Coke wine today, and I think you're going to love it, okay? So, even if you break this down further into parcels, 4,000 growers in Val de Salnais, 15,400 parcels, right? That just starts to kind of paint a picture of how chopped up this is and really how it's about agriculture, okay? So another interesting factoids, more than half of the winemakers in Rias Baixas are women. That's awesome, right? We're seeing this more and more. Women are taking a bigger role in winemaking, which has historically been a male-dominated industry. Same thing on the sommelier side. Way more women nowadays, and year is more and more, which is awesome. Also, have a lot of Celtish culture that is established here because the Celts were once here. And the capital, Santiago de Compostela, is the final destination for the Camino de Santiago, which is, there's been a ton of books written on it, a ton of movies made about it. Thanks, Reese Witherspoon. And has anyone done it? No one's done it here. No one. I haven't done it, so I can't say. But it's on my list. I really want to do it. It's essentially a pilgrimage that is in honor of St. James, who was one of Jesus' disciples, apostles, and was the person who killed. He was beheaded. His body was put on a ship, is how the kind of legend goes, to be brought to Santiago to be put to rest, and a big storm crashed the ship, sunk the ship, and his body was lost. However, it supposedly washed up on shore a little while later, totally intact, head and all, even though he was beheaded, and it was covered in scallop shells. Okay, and so that is the kind of symbol for the Camino de Santiago. When you're on the trail, you can look for these shells on buildings that are kind of like a symbol of, hey, this is a safe place for you to come and get some rest and eat or whatever. So there's a lot of different legends as to why the scarlet shell is what it is, but The reality is that this is an area that is really focused on seafood when we look at the cuisine, because you're right on the ocean, and it's some of the best seafood in the world. That's coming from a guy who grew up in Cape Cod, Massachusetts. So really awesome shellfish here. Mussels are phenomenal. Prosthetis are really, really good. They're these barnacles, and they look weird and maybe a little scary to eat. Like when you eat them, they are super delicious, but they are really hard in a lot of cases to harvest. So just Google Prosthetis harvesting sometime on YouTube, and you'll see some really cool videos of like guys swinging from climbing gear, and it's because all these Prosthetis and other shellfish can go grow like right in the crash zone of all the surf, right? And so you're having to pick these things off rocks. So you have one guy strapped into the harness, and he's harvesting Prosthetis, kind of like looking over his shoulder, and there's another guy like yanking up on the rope to get him out of harm's way, right? So it's a pretty risky career choice, I would say, but I thank them every time I eat them because they are delicious. So the culture here, as I already mentioned before, is really, really awesome. You just have to go. They know how to eat, they know how to drink. There's a national park here that covers a lot of the region, including the islands off the coast, and it's just stunning. All right, now we're gonna taste. Cool? Yay, good fun stuff, because I know you were short of alcohol before you walked in here. Okay. Quickly, I just want to talk about, not that I want to put, the power of suggestion is strong, I realize, but what I want to show you here, talk about real quickly, is just what is the characteristic, what is the essence of El Riñón, okay? Throw it out there. What do you guys smell and taste? Salinity, most definitely. Where do you think that's coming from? Proximity to the ocean, yeah, absolutely, and due to the soil types. What else?
Orange blossom.
Orange blossom, yeah, so kind of falling into one, the citrus camp, but also starting to look at that monoterpene phenolic characteristic as well, right? Good. What else? Smells fresh, okay? So is that, are you saying that it smells delicious? It makes you want to like have another glass or another sip at least? Okay, good. What else? Mouth-watering, has acidity, right? That is the common thread in all of these, is the acidity. So that's why some people are utilizing malolactic and some are not. Because it has such an abundance of acidity, sometimes you need to soften that depending on where the fruit's coming from. If you're at a cooler site and you have tons of tartaric and malic, like really high pH numbers, you need to soften that somehow. So one is through leaves, the other is through the mouth. Okay? What else do you taste? Flint or stone. Okay, yeah, super minerally. Okay, good. So for me, it's generally in the pomaceous or tree fruit categories. You get some like apple and also stone fruits. And peach, I heard, definitely. Okay, especially from the warm regions like Canada Latea or parts of Huila, you can get more of a stone fruit spectrum, right? Peaches, nectarines, things like that. Or if you're in a cooler site, it's more citrus and pomaceous with kind of pear and apple. But always that undercurrent of acidity, acid, and also floral type characteristics. For me, the classic characteristic is apple blossom. Has anyone been in an apple orchard when it's blossoming? It smells like apple blossom. Okay. Also, that lees character. How does lees come across in wine? Mouthfeel. Also, some people describe it as like beer yeast or beer foam, excuse me, or just like a yeasty type characteristic. Okay. Awesome. Here's a little infographic for you. Didn't understand the words that were coming out of my mouth. I didn't see them. Okay. Also, there tends to be a little bit of herbaceousness as well, but more like sweet herbs, more like chervil, tarragon, basil, things like that. Okay. Awesome. Okay, so hopefully you've all had the sparkling wine. I have not, so I've been talking too much. But what do you guys think about this? Do you like it? Raise your hand if you like it. Shazam. All right. So, I just want to look at the, what's the price on this one? Anyone have it in front of me? 48. Woo! That's okay. That was not going to be the driving point that I was looking for, but I was like, look at the value here. It is. Yeah, it is the traditional method. Good question. So she asked if it's the champagne method or traditional method, which means secondary fermentation in bottle versus a tank. All right, and it is. And that's why it's expensive, part of the reason, because it's so labor intensive to make these wines, okay? When you're doing everything in the bottle, it's a lot of by hand. Of course, yes, there are machines to help speed things along, but it's still much more labor intensive and also just time intensive and capital intensive, right? You have to hold on to these wines for longer because they're generally staying longer on the leaves, and to build complexity and counteract that, or bring a counter, I should say, to the acid, okay? So this is all Albarino, and this is coming from Condado de Tea, so remember that is where? Inland or towards the coast? Inland. Is it north or south? So if you do the shot, say okay, south. All right. Awesome. So this is a vintage version. You could, of course, have a non-vintage or a blend of vintages, right? If you wanted to. But this is 9 months on the leaves and traditional method. Okay. Awesome. Let's pick up. I want to spit my Marty Palmer. Okay, 1 and 2. Any thoughts? Opinions? Did you like this wine?
Yes.
Yeah, yes, sir.
Just in general, what percent of Albarino is something that's very rare?
Percentage wise? Ooh. Trish is right here on the spot.
I guess they're doing it's less than 20%.
No, way less than 20%. Like way less than 2% probably at this stage, I would say. It's increasing, but it's really just not common. It's not very common at this stage. But more and more so, yes. But we don't have a percentage. I'm sorry. Yeah. I think we don't have a percentage because it's such a teeny tiny number. All right. So yeah. At some stage we may have a better idea of that. But okay. So this one has or has not seen oak. Where are my nerds at? Where are my songs at?
Yes.
Yeah, awesome. It definitely has to be oak. What is it talking about? What is showing you oak? Creaminess, vanilla. Okay, what else?
One or number 2?
Number 2.
Vanilla, yeah, definitely. Okay, for sure. Also, texturally on the palate, it's definitely softer, right? You're getting some additional phenolics and even a little bit of inherent sweetness from the toastiness of the oak. So this is larger format oak. It's both 600 liter, I believe, and 225 liter. So a classic barrique, but also a large barrel that's almost 3 times the size of that. Okay, and there's a fair amount of char on these barrels, from what the producer says. But I think it's well integrated, and that's the beauty of utilizing larger oak, is that you can introduce new oak, but when you have a larger barrel, you have a larger surface area of oak to wine, and so it doesn't impact the wine as much. It's a good way to introduce just a little bit of oak, and I think this is well integrated. This is coming from a Vivo Vino, which is a cool kind of collection of growers, once associated with Ordonez, but not no longer. Who likes the oak version of Albarino? Anyone dislike it? It's okay, this is a safe place. You're not going to get kicked out.
It's not, this one is not overly.
It's not overly.
It sounds very subtle.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I think it's a good example. Next one. So here now you get to taste something that's not varietal Albarino, or actually not. It's a little more kind of quote unquote classic. All right. I want to show you the outliers first.
I like that.
So this is not 100% Albarino. This also has some Lorero and Udeo and Trajadora. 11% Lorero though. Okay, and that really is the standout to me here. Is you really get a sense of what Lorero is like, even though it's 11%. You read 11%, you're like, yeah, it's not that much, right? But if you've ever done a blending trial before, you realize that even 1% can make a difference in the wine. So 11% can definitely be significant. Okay. I think this wine is, as a result, really pretty. It's really floral. It's all about the aromatics, right? So this is more of the kind of classic approach to what is normal in Rias Baixas. And this is made by Santiago Ruiz. He didn't start making wine until he retired at the age of 70. He's like, yeah, worked all my life and I'm going to work for another lifetime. Right? He's also been a big advocate of Rias Baixas, and the wines are awesome. Really, really just kind of classic, approachable, super fun. So they're coming from Orosal, which is north or south?
North.
South. East or west?
West.
West, all right, cool. Awesome. So to give you an idea of the price, it is in your book, but I think it's always kind of interesting to talk about the Indian Nora. So the oak version is $35 because oak is expensive, okay? This is $20, okay? So this is kind of getting into the sweet spot of what you can expect from really great Merinos around $20, okay? Awesome. Ooh, I can get moving. Okay, 1-4. The mic go over so sorry. Wine 4 is your first varietal wine in the classic style. So this is Martin Kodak's Albarino. This is so widely available. It's awesome. It's everywhere, right? And it's always super reliable. And if you ever want to pour something like a benchmark of what Rias Baixas is all about, you go out and you spend however much this says in there, $11 or $16. And you pour them an amazing bottle of Albarino, right? Like this is the essence of Martin Albarino. They definitely support a lot of growers, but it wouldn't be classified as a co-op. The Taco and Lola, that would be your kind of official co-op. But there are larger producers like Martin Kodak that will support the growers with purchase of the fruit, not necessarily, they don't provide a place for them to make the wine. Okay. Or they're not, they don't have a different label as the kind of co-op label. Okay. And also, the first wine where you can really start to get a sense of lees, okay? You kind of get that like almost beer foamy type characteristic, especially on the finish. That's lees, okay? And you can feel the weight on your palate too. So it finishes with lees, but also that salinity. That's really what Rias Baixas is all about. The next one, come on, there we go. It's Lagar de Condesa, 2016. So this is coming from Salnes. What is different about that wine?
It smells different.
Texturally and aromatically from the Martin Kodak, what is different about this wine? What'd you say? Oak, big oak. Very good. It's not new oak, but it is larger format oak. It's not stainless steel that this wine is raised in. So it's in more of an oxidative environment, and that really comes across one in the fruits. They're not quite as like popping and vibrant. They're more kind of lower tone, base tone and rich and deep. Okay, and that's coming from a little bit of oxygen ingress through those barrels, and kind of softening things to get more kind of like bruised yellow apple, lemon oil, lemon confit, things like that. Right? It's not that vibrant pop type style. It is more kind of deeper and lower. Right? And I like it. I think it's really good. It's just a different expression of Albarino. And one quick tangent, notice the alcohol levels on almost all these wines are pretty low, right? 12 to 13% generally. You're rarely seeing things that ever hit 14%, if ever, okay? So it's about freshness, and it's partly due to the variety, the site, but also just kind of the tradition of style. All right, so the next one, wine 6. This is also from Salnes, also 100% Albarino. This wine is made by a woman, and she's utilizing native yeast. They're relatively new winery in the big scheme of things, established in the 80s. Yeah, pretty floral. You would think maybe there's some Lorero in this, but it's not. It's all Albarino. And it just shows that even within Albarino, depending on where the site is, you can get higher expressions of those floral type tones. It's also not as much Lee's character, I would say, as the Mark that I've seen. They're really salty on the finish. Really, really salty, but in a good way. There's a little bit of more density of, like a reliance on density of fruit here, meaning a higher ripeness than the others as well, and less emphasis on leaves. Do you feel that on the palate? Yeah, cool. Also, the fruit set is a little bit braver, like peachy, very peachy, right? Compared to the other one, which is more apple-y, the other two. Cool. All right, the next line, line 7. So this is coming from the co-op. This is Paco and Lola. Most of their labels have polka dots on them. That's kind of their jam, the deal, whatever. This is their one of their top bottlings. It's coming from the oldest vines, and it's all the free run juice. Okay, so when you put the wine in the press, rather than running through the press cycle, you're just letting that free run come out. And a lot of people consider that higher quality. I personally like a little press juice in my wine, but it is kind of the purest expression of whatever is in that press in a lot of ways. Also, they hold this wine back before they release it for 4 years after it spends time in neutral barrel for a year. Excuse me, for a year. So you're looking at 5 years of release, of aging before release, rather. So this is kind of showing you that Albarino can also age, right? Yeah, it's really, really, really good. And the price of this, even if you think about all the capital that it takes to keep that wine back, it's $50, right? Now, is that inexpensive? No. Is that expensive? Not really, when you're talking about fine wine, right? You pay $50 in Burgundy, you're maybe going to get a decent Bourgogne blue, right? Maybe. Okay? Think of all the complexity that you're getting from this line, and all the work that went into this. So because it's seen aged, it's really developed in the bottle to have this kind of like nuttiness. So that plays really well with the saltiness of Albarino. There's a real density there. The fruit's kind of starting to be more, not cooked, but just more concentrated. I like that one a lot. And it's from a co-op. Okay. And the last one, so that we almost finish on time, is Paso de Señoran. So this is a really historic property. It's been there since the 16th century, but it was purchased by the current owners in the 1970s. This particular bottling is coming from a plot right behind the winery, mid-slope, like one of the best plots that they have. And it's their top bottling. It's imported by Eric Solomon from European Cellars. I've been buying this wine for years. I will continue to buy it for years. I just absolutely love it. They also support a lot of other growers as well. And as you see, this also has some age to it as well. Do you think this is more advanced or less advanced as wine 7? More advanced or less advanced than wine 7?
Less.
Yeah, less. And that's because the élevage is a little bit different, so it spends a little bit less time in an oxidated environment. But and to me is pops a little bit more. It's not better than the other one. I like the other one a lot. It's just different. Okay. But again, this wine is not expensive, and it's freaking awesome from year to year to year. $55, not inexpensive, but not bad. Cool. I hate to wrap it up so fast, but that's all I got. All the time I have for you. It's all in the lab. So. Okay, if anyone wants the presentation emailed to them, you are welcome to have it.
Just give us your business card or take my card.
Yeah, give a business card to Trish here. She will make it happen.
So do you have bottles back there we should take a photo?
There are bottles back there you can take photos of, and or they're all in your little.
Yeah, but you want what's your Instagram about?
Oh, you can't Instagram the packet. No, very important.
Spanish wines. Rias, Baixas, 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 Baixas.